Hello, everyone, once again, and welcome, Graham Parks, to our uh, Negative East Asian Thought School. And I already introduced you in the announcement as the legendary figure, the very important figure who connects East Asian and Western philosophy. And it turned out that a lot of people already knew that you are legendary. So, um, first, I will ask some questions and then I'll invite the participants to ask their questions. And we might have some time that we're not recording this talk if anyone doesn't want to be recorded. Yeah. So, um, some of the questions that I wanted to start with is that reading your amazing work and readings that we had for before this talk, it feels like Nishitani, for example, there is another layer that he gets to and that Western philosophy never got to. It's like Western philosophy got stuck somewhere. Um, where Nishitani actually is able to reach, or maybe East Asian philosophy as general? That was the question.
Yeah. Um, I think that's well, I mean, certainly Nishtani himself uh, politely suggests that most Western philosophy has stayed on the surface. It's been concerned with consciousness and concerned with representations. I mean, he talks in Kantian language, so that we are subjects of consciousness and we know the world through representations. And he calls it the field, the bath, the place, the field of, or the level of consciousness, also the level of sensation and the field of reason as well, because he says reasoning is one of the things we do on that field. And then he says, in East Asia, and in the Zen tradition, and in my Nishtani's philosophy, he says we've got two other layers. That's only the most superficial layer happening there. And we've got two other layers that he calls the layer of nihility is the next one down. And as you go down, you broaden out for Nishtani. So each lower layer is more encompassing than the one above it. And thirdly, you get to, at the lowest fundamental level, you get to what he calls the field of shunyata, the field of emptiness. And it's pretty clear that that's where it's at for Nishtani, because he says on the level of consciousness, we're only dealing with representations. We have images of things, we have concepts, we have all this wonderful mental apparatus, but we're still playing around on the outside of things. We're not getting to their heart in any important sense. And so, yeah, that's a pretty. Now, I would say, if you say, well, wait, how about the field of nihility, where things fall apart? Don't we have people in the West who have talked that way? And I suppose we do. I suppose uh, some of the mystics, for example, like Meister Eckhart, uh, certainly someone like Montaigne, he's a very important figure. I think Montaigne, uh, not for Nishtani, but for me or for us. Um, and let's see who else maybe, yeah, in the 19th century, uh, people like Schelling, maybe Schopenhauer to some extent, certainly Nietzsche and Heidegger. You would say, yes, they have a sense of that field of nihility, because at that level, nothing makes sense. And maybe the best example, if people know Heidegger, would be what happens in Angst, in Being in Time, in Sein und Zeit, that there I can't relate to anything. I was in this world, I was being in the world, and then suddenly everything is slipping away from me and flying off in all directions, and I can't relate to it anymore. And I can't speak. Um, Anxiety is interestingly, um, the word angst and our word anxiety has to do with angustia, has to do with the narrowness of the throat. And so you can't actually utter words on that level. So you can't even talk. And it's a realm of complete meaninglessness. It's also, to some extent, a realm of death. Uh, and that because you could say consciousness, the top level is the field of life, and the second level is a field of nihility. It's a field of death. Nothing works. Nothing happens. It's not that everything disappears. It's as in Heidegger's Angst. He says it's not that things disappear. It's that we can't relate to them anymore. And I think Samuel Beckett is a wonderful example. I used to use Beckett in teaching Heidegger because if you want to know about angst, then just read What, that wonderful novel of Beckett, who spends long hours contemplating a pot on the kitchen table, and it agonizes him because he kind of knows what it is, but no, it's not a pot, but what is it? What's going on here? So and then at the third level, if one is lucky enough to sort of manage to fall down to that depth, everything is okay again. This is the level of emptiness. Everything is wonderfully related. Everything is very obviously relating to everything else. There's a lot of joy. There's a lot of love. There's a lot of it's obviously the place to be. And there, for the first time, Nishtani says, we are encountering things. We are able to get through to things, to get to the heart of things, and meet them on their own home ground, as he often puts it. And so, yeah, it's a sense of not dancing around the outside the surface of things, but getting to their heart, as he sometimes says. And there's a tradition of that. I mean, I think you find that in Nietzsche there's a tradition that says that love will get you a long way here, and love will get you to the heart of the things that you deal with. Um, there's a whole lot more to say about that, but shall I take a breath and let you let you say something before I go
Y-
on?
you can if you want, but you basically answered beautifully all all the questions that I had, except for we can now work to unfold them in a way. And one of the things, the effect you produce on me is that you make me like love Heidegger again, because for me, and maybe you're reading um, after Nishitani of Heidegger that makes you see in Heidegger what he actually missing, but what I want him not to miss, like actually have there, is this for me, Heidegger is very important in talking about death, in bringing, seeing death as constitutive to existence, as bringing those poles together, and seeing obviously Nietzsche too, and seeing uh, life as just unfoldment of death. But what Nishitani offers is even more like intense togetherness of death and life. It's like not two poles anymore, not the opposite that coincide, but something that happening every moment. It's not the future project of death that unfolds in life, and this is what life is or existence is, but like this impermanence of things, something that happens every moment. There's more intensity to this concept now, and I think you see it in Heidegger, but I think it's your Nishitani's reading going back to Heidegger and able to maybe in late Heidegger who changes and like he starts to be even more weird in a way. But there's something more about death that Heidegger's, I think, was able to connect death and life in Nishitani's reading, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's funny, I'm liking Heidegger less as I get older. I, I suppose that maybe I spent too much time on Heidegger. Did spend a lot of time on Heidegger. But yeah, although I still think he's very good. I go back to him on technology, for example. That essay, the questioning technologies is a wonderful piece. And yeah, there's a lot of that later stuff that when I was younger, I used to revel in the poetry and just let it wash over me, the German original, and think sort of Hölderlin and Rilke and so on. And nowadays, that just irritates me. I think I wish I were reading Nietzsche instead. But Heidegger is interesting. I mean, I think Nishitani and Heidegger are close on this issue. But there's a funny ambivalence in Heidegger because, on the one hand, having read people like Georg Simmel, for example, and Georg Simmel was a big influence. His essay on death and immortality was a big influence on Heidegger. Uh, Heidegger does mention him very briefly in a footnote. The idea that death is already einbezogen, it's already included in life. And so it's not something in the future that will happen. It's one of our possibilities here now. And he does that in various ways. He talks about that in various ways. Um, One of them that I think is interesting is if death is the absolute impossibility of any possibilities for an existing human being. Um, he says it's the closest possibility. It's die nächste Möglichkeit. It's the one that's closest to me, and that fits with the idea that death is already intertwined and bound up with life. It's already happening. I mean, of course, to some extent, it's already happening in the body. Um, and I'm interested in things like the mitochondrial apoptosis. I can never remember that's cell death. Cells have to keep dying. You know, they keep getting dying and then getting renewed and so on. And what happens, interestingly, in cancer is that the cell refuses to die. And so it keeps on living. And that's a really interesting thing that a pathology like cancer should be the should be based on not dying, should be based on a cell insisting on not following that law of impermanence that you started out with a cell insisting, no, I'm going to persist here rather than make way for the next one. Um, so anyway, there's that side of Heidegger. But then when you get to division two of being in time and you have authentic existence, you have the possibility of authentic existence, then that has to do with, it's a wonderful image. He says the self shattering itself on death, the inauthentic self shatters itself. It's so futural, it's so going into the future that it just falls apart and splinters against its own death. After running forward to it, he uses this word vorlaufen, and that imagery doesn't fit with the other imagery because if we are futural and and are possibilities in the sense that the possibilities are already here at every moment, there's nowhere for me to run forward to. That's only on the old idea of the future is something that hasn't happened yet. But he he talks about the that's death as actuality, the actual dying, which doesn't interest him because he says philosophically, what's interesting is the idea of death as a possibility. So I think there's something I never quite know. Maybe I'm missing something, but there seems to be a little bit of confusion there in Heidegger. Um, but the idea of Nishtani's idea of death being underfoot at every step on the way, and this is the field of nihility again. Um, has to do, it's bound up with this idea of temporality, the idea that the sort of momentariness comes from the Indian Buddhist tradition. The idea that all dharmas arise and perish momentarily. Uh, Everything comes into existence and goes out of existence uh, at every moment. Um, and strangely, it happens again in the next moment and the next moment. And those moments are close enough together that we don't notice that what's happening, that there's an arising and perishing going on. And I always used to use the example of the film strip, because when and actually it's a good example for Heidegger because we can talk about projection. When you project a film, there's got to be a bit of black comes between every frame so that it looks smooth. So we don't see that. It's so momentary that we don't see it, and we get the illusion of duration, of something lasting. And both Nietzsche and Heidegger talk that way when they talk about temporality, in a very interesting way, that it is momentary. Nietzsche says quite often, there is no such thing as Dauer. There's no duration. Duration is just is an illusion that we get from smoothing everything out that's happening. And I don't know if you've ever had a near-death experience, but I started to understand this temporality a lot better when I almost got killed and everything slowed down. You know, they say your whole life passes in front of you very quickly in those experiences. I didn't get that at all. I got as if the projector of my life were breaking down, and I was seeing the black in between each frame, and so everything was going pop 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 pop. It was the most strange experience. Um, but I think when I think back in retrospect, I think it was an experience of what Nietzsche and Heidegger would, and Nishitani too, would say, well, that's actually what's going on. Uh, I suppose if the body goes into shock or if it suddenly thinks this is the end, um, maybe it goes into the real, the mode of reality, which is, yeah, it's all happening moment by moment. Um, but in any case, what you take, or what I took away from it was, yeah, I get the arising and perishing at every moment. And of course, um, so far for all of us, since we're still alive and more or less kicking in my case, um, uh, so far the next moment has turned up, and we find ourselves still alive. But of course, we know intellectually that at any moment it might all be over. Um, and that's where I think the the Zazen, the Zen meditation, comes in for Nishtani, because he talks a lot about Dogen, and Dogen talks a lot about this momentariness as well. And he says you learn it through the sitting meditation, through following the breath, because every inhalation is followed by an exhalation. And that's the relaxing part when you let go. But it's also the part where, are we going to get another inhalation this time? Fortunately, yes, so far we have done. But we all know that no, it's called breathing your last. We all know that there's going to be an exhalation, a very unique one in one's life that isn't followed by another inhalation, because you're dead. Um, so, uh, so to relate this back to nihility, uh, I think if you are stuck in this mode of really experiencing and feeling the momentariness, um, that might be why it's hard to go on. It's hard to do anything because we're not used to that. We're used to living in some sort of duration. So yeah. so I think that's the sense in which, uh, because of their ideas of temporality, that we can say that yes, they have a very interesting idea that death is already bound up with every moment of life. It's just that we don't see it. Um, let me just say one more thing about the nihility. It's difficult to um, I mean, if you ask Nishtani, well, how does it happen? How do we get there? How do we end up on that? How do we slip down to or drop down to that field? Um, he gives some examples of the loss of a loved one, or I don't know, your big project collapses and now everything is meaningless because it's gone. Um, uh, those sorts of big life events that um, sorry, big life events that can knock us for a loop. Um, uh, various kinds of drugs will do it. Um, it's not, in my experience, a pleasant phenomenon. In fact, it's exceedingly unpleasant. Um, but there it is, and Nishani would say, okay, and so now there's two possibilities. Uh, you can get back up, you can go back up for air and say, oh, well, that was nothing, as as Heidegger says. Um, or you can let yourself go and drop further into it, let yourself down further. And Nishtani says then there's going to be a turn. And the Zen people often use this idea of a turn that suddenly that everything scattered and all over the place and falling apart turns into its opposite and everything knits together and joins up um, um, beautifully when it happens. And so Um, but there's no, in the Nishtani paper, the practice in philosophy as a matter of life and death, I quote Hofmannsthal, who was born just a few minutes away from where I'm sitting here. A very interesting character, brilliant author. And his letter purported to be a letter to Francis Bacon from Lord Chandos is, I think, just I've never seen such a wonderful evocation of the of those three levels in a way. And I didn't ever get a chance to ask Nishtani if he knew that story, because it starts with not being able to speak properly, and the words are like decaying, rotting mushrooms in your mouth. It's a wonderful image, and of course, with a mouthful of rotting mushrooms, you can't say a whole lot or can't say much that's comprehensible. Um, and then he says after that that these completely insignificant things started to take on, an aspect, a wondrous luminance and radiance, and so on and so forth. And he spends his life, I mean, not his life, he spends the rest of the day um, just contemplating how amazing everything is. So, okay, I've run out of steam again, and I'm not sure if these things are coming together.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. It's really tempting to ask about love at this stage because this is the level where it can be introduced. But I will follow my order that I prepare with my questions, and I will ask about love in my next question. But for now, the way you talk about death and the way you write about death, and your take is informed is a horrible word, but developed, relying together with Janza, for example. Um, and Nishitani, it seems like death is it's a loving attitude to death. It's death as a homecoming. It's death as something almost kind. I like in Western contemporary take on it as just pathology, is something to get rid of, and failure, the enemy of life. We should not talk about death in a loving way. It's just forbidden, isn't it so?
Yeah, I mean, I remember Angus Graham, the great scholar of Chinese philosophy, in the course of a conversation once said to me, the thing about death is it's always regarded as something rather gauche, that something one shouldn't be doing, and certainly not in public. And I think that's true, that especially in the US, it's embarrassing if you die. If we know you and you die, what don't you have any considerateness for others? So yeah, we don't want to know about it. We want to sort of sweep it under the carpet and just, yeah, it's a bit um yeah, it's not very good. Um, but yeah, you mentioned Zhuangzi because and I thought of Angus Graham because he has a good translation of the Zhuangzi, not as good as Brooks, but extremely good, interesting one. Um, yeah, that for Zhuangzi, he says, look, for one thing, who knows? We don't know about death. They don't, the dead do not, they're remarkably silent, they really don't say much. Well, they don't say anything, in fact. Well, I suppose some people say something, but no, for the most part, we don't learn from those who have died what it's like. So he says, we don't know what it's like. Maybe it's wonderful. Yeah, maybe we would feel as if we had come home. And I think I mean, it's interesting because I'm interested in what people uh in how people what their attitude toward death is. What do they think's going to happen to them uh personally? And I find people not very interested in talking about this topic. Uh, and it's not because I happen to know they're Christians and they're going to have some idea of the immortal soul will rise up to the kingdom of heaven and so on. And they think they don't want to say that to me because they know I'm a godless Nietzschean. Um, but yeah, it's funny. People aren't very comfortable with that. Um, the Zhuangzi story where there's the three or four old guys. Um, I mean, I'm getting to the age where I almost have these conversations with some of my peers. Um, that okay, you've got some ailment. We've all got some ailment, and you think, well, yeah, but then what? I resent it. Well, no, this is Tian. This is heaven. This is fate. This is what happens when you get to your age. Things fall apart. And why don't we see it rather as interesting? What's going to happen next? What's going to be the next transformation? And the old guys who are wondering, yeah, what will I get? What will the maker of things see fit to change me into? And it's not my place to say, by the way, I'd like to come back as a bird or a fish or whatever. No, no, just take as it comes. Do what you're told. Find out what the maker of things has in store for you. And I've always thought that's the most obvious way that in Angus Graham's translation of when he's talking about qi, he says, a life is a gathering together of qi energies, and when those energies dissolve, then that's death. And that makes a whole lot of sense to me. If you think of the body as a configuration of energies that is holding itself together for a period of time, then yeah, they are going to fall apart at some point. And you've got qi comes in as you know, in various levels of refinement and rarefaction and so on. And Jing, the very finest, most quintessential version, is so fine that it's everywhere in the universe. It's throughout the whole world. So when people say, no, I'm not religious, and I don't believe in the salvation of the soul or anything, but maybe I'll live on for a while in the minds of people who know me. And that would be the Taoists would be fine with that. That would be a rather subtle form of quintessential qi that has spread out from you and your location to others. And I think I see it's getting quite popular now, and I don't understand. Um, I'm trying to think of the politer name. The less polite name is human composting. You've heard of that, right? Instead of burying you, putting you in the ground, they put you in a box for a while and render you down to some powder or soil, and then you can get planted at the foot of a tree. And I think I mean, that's a wonderful, it's very Taoist in a way, because, you know, your family would know and the few friends that care, well, this is where this is where you were at the base of this tree, and that tree is sucking up nutrients, including you. Um, so yeah, I think those for my money, the Taoists have the best idea about how this whole thing works. Um, but no, we don't get to talk about love, you said, till the next question. Um, but now I've forgotten what the question instead of love was. Did I answer it?
So the question was about death as maybe loving and instead of hating death. But
Yes, right,
I
right.
really want to ask a question about love because for me it's very important one. My issue with pessimist philosophy, which I think I to a great extent belong. It lacks love. It like doesn't have space for love, and it was such a relief in a way that it seems that in Nishitani there is space for love. At least maybe not in nihilistic level, not in uh, nihilism, but in the emptiness, that's where there is love, not the romantic love, but love as a philosophical concept of intimacy of everything. And it's not that you can skip, like it's going deeper than nihilism and it's going through nihilism and it's rather not even going anywhere. It's where nihilism takes you. That's what amazing. It's not, there is no you loving good person anymore. Not even you who enjoy. But if there is enjoyment, the word that I have troubles tolerating, but at least it's not yours. It's what you, and maybe it's also where you dead already. There is no, because it's not the level of consciousness on which Western philosophy is only able to operate, including pessimist, my favorite thought. But if you go deeper, you lose your ego as ego death. So it's not, there is love, but there is no you. And there is joy, but there is no you to, so, because you're dead, which is okay with me. If there is joy, but it doesn't belong to you, like something that is seen as the goal of existence of a subject in Western philosophy. Maybe I can deal with I'm okay with this enjoyment. But the thing is that it's a relief for me that there is space for love in the nihilistic thought. It's something even more nihilistic than nihilism, and there is love there, which I find amazing. It's not this horrible, it is meaningless world. It is horrible, but still there is the most profound level there. If you go deeper, is love. No you, but there is love.
Right, right. Uh, I think, yes, I mean, certainly with Nishtani, and with Nietzsche as well, I suppose uh, it's not going to happen at the level of nihility because you're already not there, but everything else nothing's connected. Everything is separated by an abyss, and so there's no possibility of joining together. But when you get down to the level of emptiness, then certainly Nishtani talks a lot in Religion and Nothingness about love. Um, Actually, mostly about the Christian idea. Um, he quotes Matthew when he talks about the the love of God or God's love, and uh, and he lets the sun rise on the evil as well as the good, and the rain fall on the just as well as the unjust. And Nishtani quotes that one a lot because it's somewhat, I think, in East Asian tradition, if you think of Zhuangzi again, if you think of Qian, think of the idea of heaven is it's such a big thing in Chinese philosophy because it's impartial. And it's like the God that lets the rain fall on the just as well as the unjust. That it's not, it has no ego. It's not trying to do it. There's no purpose, not trying to do anything. So yeah, when you get down to that third level, Nishtani talks about Mahu Karuna, the great compassion. And you're right that that's an openness and a joining together with things that is joyful um, and is um, indifferent in the sense that Tien is indifferent. It's not making the normal discriminations. And so that allows you to love your enemies, which is pretty, pretty big challenge, I think, for most people. Um, and then and then the question comes up. You may have been going to ask it, but for me, the question then comes up. So wait, does that mean that everything is kind of equal? I mean, you're going to love Hitler and Donald Trump and the Holocaust and everything equally? Um, mm, no, it better not mean that because then if it does, that's not going to work for me. Um, no, I think it means that you uh, you're not making those usual discriminations from the point of the ego. You know, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. Or the Buddhists would say, this is what I'm attracted by, this is what I'm repulsed by. You've gone beyond that. Um, but that still doesn't mean uh, that you aren't going to work to make some changes in the world. I mean, now, I don't know how Brooke is on this. I'm thinking of my friend Hans-Georg Müller, who's a great expert on Daoism, but reads Zhuangzi in a very quietistic mode. That the sage is just floating through, not really engaged. Um, how do we get? How do we get? Or another way of putting it, you have at the level of consciousness, you have attachment. We like things, we love things, we want things. At the level of nihility, you've got detachment, whether you like it or not, um, because you are detached from everything. Now, that sort of detachment, I think in the death essay, the death and detachment essay, of course, you can practice that. And you could say, yeah, I'm going to be like Socrates or the Stoics are. I'm going to do exercises and gradually detach myself so that when death happens, I won't even be here. I'll be so blissed out. I'll have merged into the universe, and it can't get me if I'm not me and if I'm not here. Um, and then I think I would say the level of the field of emptiness, you have what the Buddhists call non-attachment. That is, no, you're still here. I mean, I remember in the 70s in Berkeley, there were, I checked out a lot of holy men. They were all men, I think. And the ones that impressed me uh, not the most, but the ones that impressed me in a certain way were the ones that were totally detached. They were smiling, they were blissful. I bet you got a sense that they weren't really here anymore, that they were so blissed out that was there a human being present in your interaction? And very often the answer for me was no. Um, but with the Tibetans and with the Zen people, I think they were at the third level where you had non-attachment. They're not attached to stuff, but they haven't left us. They're still here. They're trying to do something. And it's that, they call it engaged Buddhism. But there's a sense in which I think you can have that love that doesn't discriminate and still say there are certain things that we could improve upon in the world. Fewer holocausts, for one thing, and more good stuff happening, whatever we think is good. That the the if we think of it in terms of Dogen and the idea of Buddha nature, um, the whole totality of what is going on. Um, uh, People say, okay, so plutonium waste, is that, and plastic, and maybe plastic's an even better example because it's becoming more deadly. Plastic, is that Buddha nature? It didn't grow naturally, so it doesn't sound like something that's natural because we have the idea of birth in that word. But no, it is. It's part of the totality. It's here. It exists. So it's Buddha nature. But the way around saying, well, in that case, we just throw up our hands and say, well, duh, we'll let happen whatever is going to happen. Um, no, we would want to intervene, or might want to intervene, because we can see the way that the whole thing is hanging together, and that there are certain things in it, in the whole network of processes like plastic that are royally screwing things up. They're fucking up the environment because they can't be, they're not food for anything. They can't be recycled into any natural ecosystem. So you can easily be ecologically loving to the whole thing, but say there are certain aspects of it that we're going to have to do something about because look what they're doing. Look what they're doing to the rest of it. I mean, another criterion for me would be, how long it takes for those plastics to break down. So I know they're not going to get recycled anytime soon. It's going to be centuries before they go. The Buddhists would say, wait a minute, why are you even making stuff like that? Don't you know everything's impermanent? Of course, it's not going to last forever, but for something to be that close to being permanent is going to be suspect. It's going to be a part of Buddha nature that you think, yeah, maybe we don't need or we don't want. But okay, we're gradually getting towards yeah, was that your love question already?
Yeah, that was my love question. You forgot to mention when you listed Hitler and Trump, you forgot to mention Putin. I mean,
Ah,
as a
yes.
Ukrainian, I need to remind you. And also, I thought about him. Well, as a Ukrainian, I think about his possible death every free moment I have. But when you mentioned cancer, it reminded me of Putin. He refuses to die to go, and plus there are rumors that there are various versions of Putin's, which is not just one. It's very, in a way, unnatural. But I wanted to maybe,
I'm sorry, can I
yeah,
interrupt there? Because I'm with you 100% on that. But what it's an example of, I mean, let's bring Elon Musk into the conversation. Um, these tech guys that are destroying the planet and becoming multi-billionaires by doing so, um, they want to be around forever. They're obsessed, as Putin is obsessed with either injecting themselves full of stuff or uploading the contents of their formidable brains to where? I don't know. Where's the server going to be? Um, or just they want to be around forever. And it connects with, I just wanted to connect it back to what we were saying about the ego and the non-ego, because I think the more, if you think about it, the more I think about it, the prospect of death is something that it's the ego doesn't like it at all because I'm invested in being me and in continuing to be me. And the more I can weaken that identification, I think, and the more I can have a broader sense of who I am in my interconnections with people, the less terrifying, the less obnoxious, the less horrible death is. And I think the size of the ego and the size of the bank balance and the desire to last forever are perfectly correlated with these people. That they and I think one of the reasons they don't mind destroying the planet and what they're going to go to somewhere else, I hope. I wish they'd go now. One of the reasons they don't mind is that many of these people don't even, I think they don't really believe that they're fundamentally embodied. I mean, they are post-Cartesian dualists, and they uh, sit at the computer all day, and so it's very easy to think that you're only a mind, that you don't really have a body until it starts to ache. And yeah, I think these issues of death, refusal, sort of being offended by even the prospect of death, all these hang together with destroying the natural world and destroying other people and people that you don't like, um, and wanting to do it forever and ever and ever. I mean, just being there's that wonderful Stoic image of I think it's in Lucretius, of the banquet, that when you get, okay, you've had your dessert, now we've got new people coming in and it's time to go now. That was it. No, okay, one more glass of wine and then you're finished. No, they don't want to get up. They want to just keep on eating and drinking forever. Um, so anyway, sorry, I interrupted you, but I did want to connect that back to the big ego with the death thing because I think it's important.
So I promised people here that my questions will take around an hour, and I have only a bit of time left. So I maybe skip to ask just one last question that is important, strangely for me, and then ask if people want to participate. That's the question of motherhood, uh, because in Western philosophy, well, we all know from feminist critique that the subject of the philosopher is male, and the feminist philosophy will try to add woman to it. But my question is rather about mothers, the motherhood. Even feminists uh, ignore motherhood, and it seems the similar thing. There is what is happening is in Eastern perspective, it's still a male uh, person, subject, and who goes through, like, it is about the male body that all the practices are uh, about, including a practice of ego death. Well, as a mother, I know that the best practice of ego death is becoming mother. It's like very natural, and it's very quite artificial for people to do it the other way. Like, you have to do so much just to get where your own body is taking you. When you decentralized from yourself, when you're instead of being called your name, you just called mother, mom, because that's what they can pronounce, and like like everyone else, doesn't matter who. So there's certain things that for as a mothering is the natural practice, and I think it's even better than ego death, because with ego death practices is still there's this paradox that because your ego is dead, your ego becomes better. It's kind of so it's not it's not proper death of ego, and here your ego is properly killed. You have no chances of thinking, well, you might have a chance to think that you're a better person because you're a good mother, but I don't think you really do it. You're just deprived of yourself. So I think that as for ego death, this practice, which is unfortunately or maybe fortunately uh, is not possible for some kind of people like male people. But it also reminds me of death. like being mother, and especially precisely because it is death in a way that your child is produced through your body, and your body is orienting itself to produce someone else, functions in the interest of someone else, not you, or like both of you. So you're basically a supplier, but because it's a radical change. And one of the reasons I have child, I'm thinking now, is that it was interesting to, it's like you unlock something about your body that is just interesting to go through. A horrible reason to have children, and I don't recommend it. But it's just it just radical change in a similar way. I think I don't have this experience yet, but death is a radical change, and your body knows how to die. There is this, it just go does it naturally, something happening that brings it to radical transformation of you that is alive into you who is dead. So I think it would be also interesting to looking forward to also go through this experience. But unlike with children, you can only go through it once, I think. So, and you won't be there to remember it, to analyze it or something. So there are lots of similarities with death and motherhood, and it's a pity that the motherhood is not something that is mentioned. Like women are seen, it's the impression is that they're worse than men. They cannot even start the whole ego death or other type of philosophical practices.
Yeah, that's I mean, I think, it's true. China, Japan, Korea, I mean, they're all still very patriarchal societies, and they were much more more patriarchal back then, I think. Um, and so, yes, that's interesting. It's something I haven't thought a whole lot about, is the who is the I that we're talking about when we're talking about a particular person. I mean, it's interesting, the Taoists, the Lao Tzu especially, and all the feminine imagery there, because the Lao Tzu was in a way, I think, rebelling against the patriarchy that at some level. And so you have a lot of feminine imagery that's actually very positive. They want to sort of bring the yin to prominence because the yang has been simply too overwhelming. Um, but yes, and the mother, I mean, anything that comes into being in the Chinese worldview, all the words, and we're not always aware of this because the translations don't give it to us, but the word shang, birth, that everything is producing things, everything is birthing, everything is generating. It's all, none of the idea that when we think of something being coming into being, we often think of it being produced, being made. That's a Western thing, that we think something has to have a force from outside come and work on it, the matter, and make it into something. And then, look, here we had something new. Um, in the Chinese traditions, everything is always being birthed. It's always being coming into being through birth. Um, so that's interesting. The Oh, I was just going to say yes. Um, it and philosophically, I mean, I suppose people like Simone de Beauvoir have talked about this, but it's although as a man I'm unable to. Well, I went through the experience of my wife's giving birth, and that almost killed me because it took a long time, and at one level, I was happy to have been there, but boy, I've never witnessed anything so brutal in my whole life. I mean, I thought I'd seen some violence, but no, no, this was nature, natural processes going off the scale at 12 or 13. Um, but there was something you said that resonated, and that is that we did have, because we were both uh, working as academics, and so we were able to arrange our schedules so that I was a good 50% caretaker. And even that relatively small burden um, did a lot for me and my ego. I mean, in my getting rid of ego. Um, I think you you are forced, if you're going to be a decent parent, you are forced to be a lot less selfish, even though you're not the actual mother. You're just half of the team that's trying to that's trying to keep this event from not becoming a disaster. But that did resonate with me because I thought if there is, I mean, um, I when I was mostly concerned with what our daughter would become, but when I look back, I thought, wow, that really did change me in ways that were good. I mean, in ways that I was happy or am happy to have been changed that way. I have one more thing, a negative thing that I wanted to say um, that I might say before we take questions, because it has to do with what we were talking about. It has to do with that field of emptiness, that level of emptiness. And um, when I was thinking, I'm not enough of a negative thinker to be worthy of your series here and of your school. I thought, well, there is something that's to me striking about Nishtani and the Zen tradition because it comes from Zen. Um, and he's talking about the ontology of the field of emptiness. And he says, here's how we say it. Sorry, fire does not burn fire. Water does not wash water. And I think that's nobody knows. I don't think where exactly that comes from. Somewhere in the Zen tradition, and it's very interesting because if you think of Aristotle, if you think of the West, or if you think of Western philosophers trying to tell you what fire is and what water is, um, here you have Nishtani using the negative or praising the use of the negative because it's fire doesn't burn. I mean, first of all, it's not what fire is, it's what fire does. So that's a big difference. You could see the process philosophy coming through there that they're saying, no, not in, who cares what it is? What's important is what it does. And then Nishtani says, and we're going to not even tell it, we're not even going to put it in terms of what it does. We're saying what it doesn't do, that fire doesn't burn fire. If fire burned fire as it burns fuel, it would go out. It wouldn't be fire. It can only be what it is and do what it does because it doesn't burn itself. And the same with water washing stuff. And I think that's a very interesting way of looking at processes in the world because immediately first of all, you've got the negative there, you've got the doing, you've got the action, and you've got the negation of the action that puts you outside what you're talking about. That the fire, I'm going to tell you about fire, but I'm saying what it doesn't do. It doesn't burn fire. And you think, well, what does it do? Well, it burns other than itself. So you've already got you can't be an essentialist if you take that attitude because fire is only what it is when there's fuel, and it can't exist without fuel. So anyway, sorry, that was my one bit of negativity that I wanted to tell you that I'm enthusiastic about. That we can't say Parks didn't say anything about negativity or negation.
Mm. Uh, Thank you, Graham. Everyone knows here that even I am not negative enough to for this school or any other negative projects. But at the same time, I'm fully aware of the absurdity of the being on a negative side because I think, like, I mean, absurdly way negative because I think that positive knows about negativity more than negativity itself. You can never be, because once you touch the horror of existence, that would you forced to be positive to just be able to carry it. That's the thing. So in a way, negativity, being negative is just what is it? They call it posing or whatever. It's not really. So it is very problematic for me. And I'm also grateful for you for discussing fire and other elements because I promised this negative I Ching that I'm currently working on, and I'm failing miserably with providing the interpretation of trigrams. There's some of the elements like fire and mountain and lake and water. I just don't get the logic. There is no logic in there, and it's very hard to produce alternative logic if there is. But somehow complicating it even more, like it's for some reason it's a relief. You can think basically in any direction, maybe, and you will end up in a negative enough.
Yeah.
Thank you, Graham. I will ask so much. I'm really proud now, even more proud that my office turns out to be not far from yours at UCC, and I will probably do better work in tolerating Adam with protecting your stone garden and forcing everyone to take care of it. Um, so I will open the floor. If anyone have questions, you can ask them now. I'm still recording it, but if you don't want to be recorded, you might wait, and then you might be lucky to, if I remember what I promised, you might be lucky to ask your question and you won't be recorded, if it makes any sense. Anyone? I think, comment from Lavon. Is Lavon still here? No. Oh yeah, Lavon, I can see you. You're moving ever so slightly. I can see your amazing comment.
Hey, yeah, sorry. Um, yeah, I was just commenting about he was talking about the cells and mitochondria and cell death and things like that. And so it just came to mind. I was listening to a podcast where someone was talking about the anabolic and catabolic states of cells. And I thought, well, my goodness, that sounds a lot like negative psychoanalysis and how we're always in this constant stage of, though we do end up in entropy, we are still building and destroying at the same time. And I just thought that was a nice analogy for what we were talking about. But I would say for myself in a personal question would be more, I have tended to see the Eastern thoughts as more dissociative. Um, I have a son who dissociates quite a bit and he loves meditation and he can really govern his breath and do some very interesting things. And so when I say dissociative, I don't mean that in a pathological or bad way. I think it's a very interesting technique to survive what we go through in life, and life-saving technique in many ways to dissociate. So I don't see it negatively in the sense of being bad. And how that relates to the Eastern religions in, depersonalization and derealization, like actually allowing yourself to get outside of yourself into the real or into a different state of being. So I don't know what you would say about that.
Yes, I think that's um uh not sure that I would call it dissociation, but certainly, and dissociation, I suppose, would link back to the field of nihility, where things aren't relating to each other the way they usually do. And I think what that brings up uh, is something about the quality of the interconnections that uh, Buddhism and Daoism, I think, would both have something to say about, which is that, yes, on the level of consciousness, normal life, and so on, there's a whole lot of stuff that we miss, that we aren't interested in because it would be too much trouble to really find out what's going on. And so we kind of just drift through and get by with a sort of, I mean, Nietzsche's good on this. He says, yeah, with the lie he says we're deceiving ourselves, that there are things and there is duration and so on and so forth. He says that none of that is true. What there is constant flux, and the constant flux is difficult to deal with for any of us. It takes some practice, and so you need some sort of dissociation from the given, whatever your culture says, well, this is who we are, and this is how things go, and this is how they should go. And I think a slip down to the level of nihility is something that gets you out of that, and that these yeah, Buddhism, Taoism would both say, yeah, the common sense and the everyday sense of reality and so on are fine as far as they go. They go as far as keeping us alive, but the question is, Nietzsche would say, yeah, but we keep ourselves alive through lying to ourselves, that life demands dissimulation and so on. And he's much more interested in the dead world, which he said is just so tight and everything is moving and happening together, and there's no dissimulation, there's no pretending. Life, that comes in at the level of life. So yeah, I think you'd have some support there with the idea that dissociation can lead to something way better than what we had before.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't like the way the Western psychology pathologizes it so much. I mean, I do think there is a point to being here and now as well, but it shouldn't be pathologized as much as it is, as something to overcome or never do, or that you're bad if you are doing it, things like that. So, but just the categorization of Western philosophy and belief systems being more a way of dissociation rather than perhaps the Western being in your body and sacrificing it, like, you know, like the Christ example that Western religion has, is that you're fully embodied and you're dying, you know, versus dissociating into something else. I find that very interesting.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
We also have a question from Glenn. Thank you both, Lavon and Graham. Glenn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm a Nietzschean psychotherapist, so it's lovely to actually meet you, Graham. I've read your earlier book on Nietzsche. Yeah, I have a question. The context for that is, I love this quote that actually I find really sort of reassuring and quite calming. You quoted it earlier about the living being is only a species of the dead. And I think in a way what Nietzsche does, or at least what that speaks to me, is that he kind of contextualizes life, that actually this is where we come from. And so my question is, you mentioned earlier, you were talking about film, and between each slide there's a blank or black screen. And I think you said it gives the illusion of duration. And my first thought was, this is about time. You're talking about the illusion of time passing. And then I quickly thought, maybe you meant actually the illusion of continuity.
Mm, mm.
And maybe you mean both, because I mean, obviously they're tied together. But where I went to with that was thinking that with continuity, you get a return. The viewer obviously doesn't know they're doing this, but with the blank screen, they then have to return to the previous one. And then they see the next one, and it gives this illusion of continuity, which fits with the moment. They're all only the moment. And then it linked to what Julie asked. I'm curious why she asks about love, but I mean, why not ask about love? We were all obsessed to talk about love. my thought about it was that maybe Nietzsche, who surely knew that he was not going to live long, I wonder with the eternal return of the same, whether he was in some way seeking a way to die within life. And that actually, when he talks about joy as being the king or the best, I forget the word he uses, that joy is the primary or the king of effects. I think joy is, in that sense, more important than love. And in a certain way, joy unlocks death in life. So I don't know. You nodded earlier, so maybe you've answered my question that you thought of continuity, but I don't know if you want to comment on any of that.
Yeah, continuity would have been a better word, I think, for me to use, the illusion of continuity, where in fact what's really happening are different images separated by a shutter comes down on the projector or something like that. There are various ways of doing it. The joy, the love, I'm thinking of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, and the really important idea that comes out of the I now prefer to call it eternal recoming, the thought of eternal coming again, because Wiederkunft in German is the second coming of the Lord. And Nietzsche obviously was playing on that. He wanted Zarathustra Zarathustra doesn't come back just once. He's going to come back again and again and again. That in ways that are too complex for us to go into, unfortunately, right now, the thought of eternal recoming is bound up with this idea that everything is connected with everything else. And when in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, when there's a few occasions on which Zarathustra says, the world became perfect, it became vollkommen. And I think of in the essay on Nishitani, I think Heidegger quotes Rilke as talking about this death side of life that's always there. It rounds life out, but it's like the other side, the dark side of the moon. We never see it, but we know it's there. But we might not. We might prefer not to know it's there. But he says, no, if we can get ourselves to love life in its fullness, in its completeness, in its spherical perfection, we'd find life a lot more fulfilling. And I think Nietzsche is saying something similar, where he says, when the world becomes perfect, everything is intertwined. Everything we see is verknotet. It's knotted together. And he says all things are in sich verliebt. They're in love with each other. So you have a bit like maybe Empedocles, the pre-Socratics. It's a cosmic eros. It's something that is holding the whole thing as it moves constantly, that is holding it all together. So yeah, there's something. It's interesting to me that when Nietzsche gets to that height, Nietzsche, the philosopher that people love to hate because he's such a jerk, because he wants cruelty and he wants domination and he wants pain and he wants all the rest of it. No, he's giving us love. He's saying the whole damn cosmos is in love. It's bound together in that kind of way. And so it seems to me that brings out an important aspect of Nietzsche that most people don't get, because that aspect of it's all being interconnected is what makes his ideas, as far as I can tell, so susceptible to being thought about in the context of both Daoism and Buddhism. before I fade out, I want to ask you who that painting's by that's behind you. It's I can't
Oh,
see it all, but it's fascinating.
yes. It's called it's by a Serbian artist. It's an oil painting. It's very large, actually. It's called The Family,
Mm.
and each figure, there's no people in it. So we project the drama. This is my consulting room. So we
Uh,
project the drama onto the image of family.
uh,
And I could tell you more about it, but the painter is called Goran Mitrovic.
ah, ah,
He's alive.
uh-huh.
So you could look him up.
Yeah, Mitrovic. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for such a great question, Glenn. And it's great to be Nietzschean therapist. That's something I used to, when I was younger, I would dream of becoming, because for me, it seemed that it's opposite to the conventional therapy. And uh,
Well,
for the
sorry. Yeah, sorry. Go on.
It's a great question about Nietzsche, because I announced this talk as talk about Nietzsche, and we ended up talking about Heidegger, who it turned out Graham doesn't like. And
Well,
you asked the most important thing about eternal. Well, it's not return, it's recoming, but that's just the most important. I just forgot to ask it, not in the same way, obviously, and for different reasons. But that's the thank you for bringing all three things here with.
well, just to say, I've not met anybody else that calls himself a Nietzschean psychotherapist. So I always have this conversation. What is that? Why? And so on. And if I go to an existentialist conference, you can throw a rock
Yeah.
in any direction and you'll hit a Heideggerian. If you throw it
Mhm.
hard enough, you might knock them out. Because I don't like Heidegger much either, but it is very interesting. And it's another question which is this talk is not about, so maybe another time. There is a good question there about why are there so few Nietzschean psychotherapists? Well, there are only one. I mean, there's lots that are influenced by Nietzsche, of course, including Freud and Jung and so on, and or Rank, for example. In fact, most of the early circle. But I don't want to hijack because there's other people, and but I could
Well,
talk
I'll
about this more.
definitely keep you in mind about that.
Mhm.
I also wanted to, and now I remember why the eternal recoming is great in terms of, like, it's just amazing to me. I don't understand what is it. I was trying to write about it, but they're just so amazing, and at the same time, and I'm unable to get it, which makes it amazing, maybe. But Zarathustra, at the same time, the love and death, when they come together, and they do in Zarathustra, I think that's the message or whatever. He dies, and he becomes a mother at the same time. It's like this, he becomes sin. That's when he's giving birth. Nietzsche, who becomes a mother when he's giving birth to other. I think it's like singing out, becoming sane enough to embrace everything in all the eternity of, not in a Kantian way, like it's the moral law, something repeats eternally, but the way it happens, you embrace it, because, and you don't exist anymore, something like it. So it is becoming a mother and dying at the same time, kind of. And it's also in Kristeva, another thing that she suggests, that the time of repetition is feminine time, women's time, and it's underneath the time, the linear time, that is like time of history. And the time of history is just a sequence of this repetition, internal returning. So the feminine, maternal, for me, is more the this pulsation of destruction that results in death, but in life, but life is just a sequence. So there's something about giving birth, uh, that this, it's more about touching the destructive core that includes everything that exists, but at the same time within more, I don't know, profound level of the destruction for some reason. And there is love somewhere there. I'm not sure. There, maybe not in an Eros way, because it's sexualized. And this kind of love is closer to death than to sexualized interpretation of it. Anyone was anything? Sorry for interrupting both of you. I managed to interrupt both Graham and Glenn. Now, Matt, do you want to ask?
Yeah, I have two questions. Number one, why not soul? All Buddhists, the east of India people, why not a Vedic notion? I mean, why are you guys not attracted to that? A soul that gathers experience, manifests something along the way, and returns, comes back. Number two, a little more practical, consciousness, nihility, and emptiness. I wrote them down like an equation, going. So let's say we can hang out in emptiness. How practically do I open the door to bring that to embrace nihility and eventually consciousness? I see that in my practice as sometimes people have access to a place of solace where they experience trust and hope. We learned that from our friend Peter Rollins from Kierkegaard. And that gives that gives us the potential strength to bear the dizziness of freedom in an existentialist sense, right? So how do you see the practice of coming from shunyata into daily life?
Yeah. Okay. To start with the soul question, I hate to sound like an analytic philosopher, but it depends what you mean by soul. There's the book that I think Glenn mentioned that I wrote on Nietzsche was called Composing the Soul.
Mhm.
And I'm fascinated by Nietzsche's understanding of soul, and but it's rather different from the traditional. It's different from the Christian soul. It's different from the notion of soul in the Indian tradition as well. It's a multiple soul, and it's constantly changing. But it has the connection with death, for example, has lots of, I mean, Nietzsche's always going back to the Greeks. So yeah, let's see, I suppose uh, in the, okay. Uh, uh, Nietzsche says, let's not, in Beyond Good and Evil, he says, uh, the notion of soul is problematic, but we don't want to get rid of it entirely because there's still some baby in the bathwater. So let's not throw the whole thing out, but let's talk about, instead of the immortal soul, let's talk about a multiplicity of mortal souls. And he uses the term many. He uses the phrase many mortal souls in each person. And so his psychology, I think, is fascinating because it's based on this idea of multiplicity. And what would that what happens there when, because we were focusing on the negative and on death, well, that soul isn't going to survive. Obviously, it's not, because there are many of them, and they're all mortal, so they're all going to go. When the body goes, the body, he says, is also that's a social structure. He says of many souls, of many different agents. So yeah, so we can certainly use the word soul, but when we get to the end, when we get to death, it wouldn't be, for the Buddhists at any rate, with their Anatman idea, I mean, explicitly against the Hindu notion of Atman, of something lasting. They say, no, there is no, the self is an illusion. It's a fiction. It's helpful to get us through life, but it's not really it's not really what's going on. Your second question.
Is that based on experience of teachings by those who had achieved knowledge of that? Because we said before that we don't know, right?
Sorry, which part? That the soul is multiple, or
No, that the soul, the anatman notion against the Vedic notion, right?
yeah. I mean, it's just. I mean, I'd say if we look at philosophies and religions as some of them are obviously aimed at the beyond, at transcendence. You know, that the what's ultimately real is not here and now, but some kingdom of God or some Brahman, or you know, there's some eternal being elsewhere. Or are we talking about existing in this world, that everything is that we've never heard any credible reports from the other world. So how about saying, okay, and you know, we have reasons. I mean, Nietzsche needs to, if he's going to talk about the mortal soul and say the immortal soul is an illusion, he has a responsibility to tell us, well, why do so many people believe that in an immortal soul? And his answer is, well, because life is hard, life is suffering. A lot of people aren't doing very well. And if you have a class of priests or that kind of type come along and say, we understand, we sympathize, we empathize, life is hard, but wait, it isn't really real. You know, this isn't the full reality. There's some other reality awaiting us after death, and there everything will be hunky-dory, everything will be fine. So don't worry, just sign up to whatever we have here. And I think you can say it's fairly easy to make that distinction also in terms of philosophies, in terms of many Indian philosophies. Are they directed towards an elsewhere, a transcendent realm somewhere other than the the place we appear to be living in on Earth here? Or do they say, no, it's all happening here? And in terms of the Buddhists, the Mahayana schools would say, now nirvana it doesn't have to do with going across to the other shore. The other shore is here already. We're there. We don't need to go anywhere. We just need to, as the Buddha did, wake up. Bud means to wake. So we just need to wake up and realize, goes back to what I was saying about when we're talking about dissociation, that no, what most people think is going on isn't what's going on at all. There's something much more interesting and fun going on. But we have to wake up to it. It's not going on elsewhere. It's going on here and now. And that's why uh, I I don't hear so much about it now, but of course with AI, we don't hear about anything much other than AI. But I don't know if you remember, there was a phase of augmented reality where people thought, well, wouldn't it be good if you put on these things and you had extra stuff in the world, you know, that your reality was augmented. I'm thinking with Nietzsche, for God's sake, we don't even understand. We have no idea what's going on in this reality, the one that we're in. Why don't we figure that one out first? So let's do some phenomenology. We can do some meditation. We can do some interesting, all kinds of philosophy and therapy we can do. And if there's time left over in life, and there won't be, I can assure you there won't be, but if there is, then we can think about augmenting reality. But I think we're beginning to realize now that this alternative realities that we're being encouraged to spend our lives in by wearing glasses, yeah, that's all mind control. That's a very disturbing development. But the question of how we handle daily life on the lowest base of the pyramid, the plane of emptiness, that's the big question for I think all these people, because it's I've always thought, having spent a little time in monasteries, you're on the mountaintop in a monastery, your food is cooked for you, everything is taken care of for good reason, because now the drive to survive we can let that go. We don't have to the drive for self-preservation doesn't need to operate if your food is going to occur, is going to turn up at meal times, and you have to work by uh, sweeping the leaves off the grass and so on. That's enlightenment and serenity is not that hard up there in the mountaintop monastery. But then they say, what about you come down to the marketplace? The ox herding pictures, they end up in the marketplace. My example is always, I don't have a car anymore, but rush hour traffic. It's let's see how you handle that one, shall we? If you are on the plane of emptiness. That's really the key, is how do we how do we do that? How do we bring the openness, the sense of connection, the sense of sanity that we get from whatever practices, and we think, okay, we know what Nishitani is talking about when he talks about the field of emptiness. Yeah, how do we bring that to our everyday lives? I'd say gradually. I don't think you can rush it, uh, and with some faith that it will happen. And um, and again, I think just to go back to Julie's talking about the non-ego, or the death of the ego, or the waning of the ego. Um, we didn't talk about perspectives and changing perspectives, because that's a huge thing for Nietzsche and for the Taoists especially, but the Buddhists also. Um, you know, uh, can I, in this domestic argument, put myself in the shoes of my wife? Well, I could, but I'm not very interested in that, because I'm trying to win this argument. But if we're not arguing, we say, okay, so I can see it from her point of view. Boy, that helps in a relationship, right? To see the situation from the other person's point of view. The Taoists and the Buddhists want to say, yeah, good. You see how that helps? Well, extend it to your friends, your children, extend it to animals, extend it to other beings in the world. Practice that changing of perspectives. That's really something that's I think uh, uh, possible and doable and really necessary for a harmonious functioning of a relationship, of a family, of a society. To be able to do that, and to be able, because the more you can do that, the more I can see this situation from her point of view. And how about if my motivational uh, whole motivational system gets shifted more to the outside? And just as we could say, look, we understand we can function as bodies because we have eaten food that's been grown in the sun. There's been photosynthesis taking place. There's gravity. There's all kinds of forces that allow me to function as a body, that aren't me, that don't come from inside me. They come from outside me. They're my context. And I always think it's not that hard to say, go for that with the motivation. That if my motivations, well, what do I want to do in this situation? My wife and I are together. It's good if 50% of it is actually, in my mind, is coming from her. And how about extending that to everyone we deal with, um, and be able to get that sense of reciprocity and of a fluid reciprocity in all our dealings with people and with animals and with things. I think that's, for me, that's quite a bit of the practice of how to get the emptiness into the everyday life would be, because the emptiness is really, I mean, another way of putting it is they always link it to pratitya samutpada, to the fact that everything is arising and perishing in connection with each other. And so one of the ways I think we can get to that more easily is by practicing that sort of perspectival flexibility.
That's really beautiful. And you wrote about that from the experience of emptiness. You wrote that we can actually experience how other beings and plants and how the world actually experiences themselves, right? So,
I mean,
yeah.
that's what that's the goal that Nishitani sets up in his book. Really, to say how to get to the core of the others all over the place. And yeah, I think that there are glimmers of possibility there that that we can do that to some extent.
Thank you, Graham and Matt. And Graham, would you be willing to take one or two more questions?
Sure.
So the
Yeah.
thing is that Veronica left her question in the chat, but she had to leave. So I can read it to you and you can answer it, and she might see the recording. So she's asking, if I may ask, you mentioned that love can bring us closer to the heart of things, and that on the field of emptiness, we are finally able to encounter things on their own home ground. Could art and music do something similar? For example, in The Black Swan, the artist experiences a first death, so to say, after losing the passion for music. Would you see this as remaining in the field of nihility, or could art itself also become a path towards emptiness? Thank you.
Yeah, I would say definitely yes. I mean, it's interesting that when you look at Nietzsche's notebooks, when the thought of eternal recoming struck him in August of 1881, and he's recovering from it and he's trying to make sense of it, he says, the thing about an artwork, experiencing an artwork where we really, when it's good and we really experience it fully, is we want to experience that again and again and again. And I think there are, if we think of eternal becoming, and what does it really mean for Nietzsche? It's interesting that he gives in his very first writings about it, he gives the example of an artwork and the way that we can, and he did, especially with music, you can go back to a symphony, an opera, sonata, whatever, or in painting, a painting that and you can, or poem that and the whole point is, yes, if they're great, they're going to take multiple readings, viewings, and so on. And so I think that definitely there's an important sense in which the arts and Nietzsche was in, I mean, after the death of the one Christian God, he obviously thought, well, what do we have left? We have the natural world and we have the history of culture. And so interesting that he should think of that particular example when he thinks of the eternal return, the eternal recoming. I just wanted to say a little more about that because, in the if I may, in the first presentation of it, there's the daimon that slides up to you and says, "Look, this moment, your whole life as it is up to now, that what if you had to live that again and again and again? And that means, most crucially, what you're about to do. Because if you're not paying attention, if you're just mindlessly doing what everyone told you you ought to do to be a good boy or girl, whatever, then probably what you do in the next moment is not what you really want to do. It's what you've been trained and conditioned to do. And so there is a way in which I mentioned it at some point in the Nishitani piece, that the thought of death, because Heidegger's big on the thought of death, it clarifies, everyone says it clarifies the mind. You say, okay, if I'm really, if I'm really finite, then I'm not going to waste my time doing this and this and this. I'm going to do this. And I think that the thought of eternal recoming plays a similar role in Nietzsche, because if I'm not paying attention and I do something stupid, uh, which I did earlier today, in fact, then, maybe I tell my wife about it, and her reaction is always, well, you did it, you have to live with it. And yeah, and if it's going to come back again and again and again, I don't just have to live with it in this lifetime. I have to live with it innumerable lifetimes more. So I really have a stake in getting this right. What am I going to do? In who am I? Because who I am is bound up with what I do in the next moment. And if it's going to come back again and again and again, I really have an interest in getting it right. And it's clear that Nietzsche has, I think we've all have, if we think back to Daoism and the way and the course and so on, moments where we thought, oh, that was good. Yeah. I mean, obviously there are quite a few moments that we say, I'd like that to come back again. Not the adolescent stuff, and no, that sucked, but just bring me the good stuff. And the moment where you think, those moments where you think, because that's what the demon asks, the daimon asks, he says, or have you had a tremendous moment where you would say, yes, I want this to come back again and again and again. And most of us have. And I think it's those are moments where we think we're on the way, that somehow, yeah, I'm getting it. That was my life. That's the way my life should be going. Now, just to finish this little excursion, the last the option of saying, yeah, just let me have the good parts and hold the adolescence, and I don't want that again. But the whole point of that thought is it's all tied together. And Zarathustra says towards the end of the book, if you say, I want that one moment to come back, yeah, because I was on the way then. I really was acing it at that particular point. I want that one back. He says, no, you pull on that, you find everything else it's connected with everything else. So sorry, you got to have the whole thing. But the whole thing is my life up to this point. And so it's not fatalistic, it's not deterministic. In fact, it's the opposite, because it means my choosing of the next moment is done with an unusual clarity, because I'm awake, I'm paying attention. And I mean, that's as far as I can go with that, because I remember being asked in a question and answer session, so, but why be paying attention? What if I just want to daydream my way through my existence? Sure, if that's your thing, but I mean, I don't have a response to that, because I found that paying attention really pays off. That's part of not missing it. But no, if someone says, I'm quite happy daydreaming or scrolling on my phone or whatever, that's all I need. Well, okay. But I think the most one can say is, well, try the other one. Try paying attention for a while. You never know. actually interest you quite a bit. Sorry.
Thank you, Graham. If I can add something, um, what I would love Nietzsche to mean when he's saying about eternal recoming, which I'm not sure he meant, but it's for me, it also reminds me, I see it as everything else as a tragic principle. The eternal recoming has to do with something with trauma because of the intrusive memory. It keeps coming back. And in a way, the question that I didn't ask about how Nishitani's idea might change in a way the comprehension of trauma, which is purely psychological, how we can see it as the rapture through the field of consciousness. You fall into some other field of nihility, or maybe deeper in somewhere not outside of the subjectivity and consciousness and mental body. But with eternal Recoming, if you see it as a tragic principle, it's when we extremely happy, we probably, I think we kind of touch the eternity with it, with just the moment everything is perfect and you want to keep it forever, and it is already forever. That's the eternity you're able to touch. But in the opposite, with the trauma happening, it's also touching the eternity, but maybe the proper way, the actual eternity or something like that. And being able to love a world and existence only in those pure moments of happiness, of joy. It's not really loving it. You have to love it. To love it, to touch love, the eternity of love is to touch it with all the horror, with the thing of the trauma is when it's not traumatic event for me, like we prefer to think something horrible happened. The horrible thing opens up as eternity of horror. This is going to be forever in your life. It happened. There is nothing you can do with it. It's also eternity in the history, which nothing in the history it was before. It will stay there. Nothing can make up for it. That's the horror of the eternity, the horror of eternity. But at the same time, to love the world, to touch love, it has to include in it with all the horror. It doesn't count if you just love it because everything is great, except for you cannot include Trump and Putin, like everything else. Maybe you can, but there is something horrifying about this eternity that is different from the eternity of happiness, that I don't know how they come together really.
Yeah, I mean, I think the um, I mean, the trauma, certainly, I think you're right that trauma is that's one way, not a way that one would wish upon oneself or anyone else that one loved. But it's one way to get to that second level, where there's just a rent, a rip, a tear in the normal cover-up that we're all complicit in, and suddenly, yeah, the horror of existence is there. And yeah, and if that seems eternal, I'm not sure what to do with that. But when you say the opposite, then you say, okay, then there would be the joy of when you could affirm eternal recurrence. The point is for Nietzsche, I mean, he's totally Dionysian there, that you can't pick and choose, that it's all you've got to be willing the eternal recoming of everything. And so including my painful, horrendous adolescence, that's got to come back again and again. Sorry, it's there. Or even, I mean, I'm thinking of the pain of getting older, and well, that's part of it. If you want to love life and hang on to life, well, you've got to get a little more open to the completeness of it all. So I think that's the I mean, I just want to adjust readjust the way we frame the goal. That for Nietzsche, it would be saying, I would, the repetition eternally of all the trauma and stuff, and then my being helpless uh, with respect to getting out of it. That would be a real nightmare. But I think the point with Nietzsche is that no, this is the point at which you can get out of the nihilistic, hellish repetition. You know, the underworld where everything is just Sisyphus is rolling the, nothing changes. It's always just the same, the same, the same. But for Nietzsche, the eternal recoming could be it's an opportunity to say, okay, and now we can break out of that pattern. We can do something different. But it's still going to involve an affirmation of what brought you here. And that's where his love of fate comes in. That all the stuff that opposed me and I hated and I struggled against and maybe overcame or didn't overcome, I'm still burdened by it. Yeah, that all belongs too. That's all part of it. That we can't, that what used to be, and Nishitani talks about this in his nihilism book, that what used to be the extreme of not self for me, which was a mathematics teacher in my school. I'm sorry, he's me. I've got to affirm him. He's part of who I am. The misery he put me through, and well, I learned a lot from it. Um, and I've got to love him as well and welcome him into the repetition. So it is. I think that's the point of it, of that thought for Nietzsche, that it's profoundly Dionysian, that it's not that, oh, and from now on, there will be no more suffering or pain or whatever. No, there will be, but it will be different. It will fit your life in a way that it didn't before, maybe.
Thank you, Graham. I think that nothing is worth this adolescence, so there is nothing you should worry about at this stage. So we have one more question, if you're willing to take it. It's again from Glenn. Glenn, is it the same question as, as
Well, no, it's not. In some ways, the question's been sort of been answered or circled around. I'm not sure it's been answered. I'm not sure it can be answered. But I think that going back to reality, one of the problems with that is it gives rise to the duality and, the unreal, or as Nietzsche would talk about it, the true world and the apparent world. And of course, he very quickly does away with the true world, leaving us only with the apparent world, which of course can't stand on its own. It too must go. And then, of course, well, what kind of paradigm do we have? And it strikes me there's something about, this poison, I forget, is it poison? Whatever it is, this person that comes, this demon or whatever, who poses this horrific question of your life repeating over and over again. And what would you say? And of course, there is amor fati, is I love my fate. So in a sense, love is included. But I think we're not required to love all these people or everything that happened. You're not required to love Putin, but in a way you're required to affirm him, which may be even worse. But I think that this idea of this terrible question, actually it gives a way out of this sort of duality. It is a reality in a way, insofar as it does, there's no, in the mathematics of infinity, there are no remainders. There is no remainder. There is nothing left out. It is reality. And this question of what's real and what isn't, I mean, at the moment, there's quite a discourse building again. And I'm sure there are practitioners here. I've been working 27 years, and I used to get people asking, but is that true? Did that really happen? Is that real? I don't get that so much now. I think people have already moved on from reality. I don't think they've quite caught up with what it means. And we still ask this question, but I don't hear as much in my work. And I think with the eternal return of the same, or the second coming, there's something there about, Nietzsche talks about joy and suffering, not as a duality, I don't know what kind of couplet it is. And maybe that's where I could put my question to Graham, because I'm sure he has something to say about it. But it seems to me that there's something about affirmation, which, if we can affirm it, we might then grow to love it, or we might not. But anyway, yeah, I'll leave it there.
I'm not sure at this point in the evening. Well, the distinction you're drawing, and I think it's important, but I can't say why, between affirming and loving, right? And certainly, I mean, the amor fati, he does use more in connection with things that happen to me and things that looked like fate because they came from outside. And the idea would be to expand the notion of the self so that in fact it's coming from me in a way, that's and so the mathematics teacher is now incorporated, he's long gone, but he's now incorporated in me as what something that I used to see as this obstacle that completely screwed up my life, and I now sort of welcome as no, I see he belongs there too. But the reality, yes, if the apparent world is all we have, then the question would be, so what is virkelig, what is real, what is working in that? What is how does that work? And I think Nietzsche's idea is that we've simply got quite a few levels of to explore. That it's not that there's and the way Nietzsche puts it in Zarathustra, especially, I think is nice, where he talks about day wisdom and night wisdom. And this is what the day says, and this is what the night says. So we have these two perspectives, day and night, I say life and death as well, and they interplay, they interact with each other, and I think they're both necessary. They're both there. They're both part of who we are. And yeah, the question would be, or rather, the task would be for those interested in it, would be how do you bring the night wisdom into your daily life? How do you incorporate that other side into your daily life? Goes back to the life and death thing, because if life and death are all bound up with each other, it's that same issue. How do you handle that if you don't look at the if you don't look at your life? I mean, just one more thing about death is I think most of us go to sleep at night. I certainly do. And I might as well be dead. Um, I mean, of course, we often dream, but it seems to me that that's another sense in which our lives are interfused with death, is that we are the ego, the I, the me as agent, me as me, is gone regularly every night for eight hours or so. And I'm always, no, I'm not always happy to wake up in the morning, but I'm usually grateful at my age, because of course that's not always going to be the case. But that's another thing that I think would be helpful to contemplate, would be to see how that night, the nights aren't under our control. We've got to put up with night coming on a 24-hour regular basis. But to think of those 8 hours or six, even if it's only six, that we're not there. Or if we are there, if we're dreaming and we remember the dream, then in some sense, we're in the underworld, as Freud would put it, or the Greeks would put it. But yeah, I think that's something that also makes that, Julie, to go back to your death as home, as comforting, as mother, and so on. I mean, most days I'm happy to be in bed and to switch off and just, I'm tired. I'm tired. I want there to be nothing. And there is nothing. And then the next morning there's something again. And I think that would be good for us to realize that our lives depend on it, because if we don't sleep and we don't dream, then we lose it completely. But that already we've got that death obviously intertwined in our lives.
I suggest we finish on this positive notice.
What a note to finish on. No, death and sleep, the brother of death. Yes.
I also promised, well, I didn't promise, I said that there might be a possibility that those who want to ask their question and not being recorded, you might have a chance, but you won't have a chance, and I will have to, it's not my first time, and I will have to live with it now forever. So I'm sorry for it, but you might be able to reach Graham, I think, in alternative ways, maybe. So thank you, Graham, and everyone for this lovely evening. And I hope we see each other at some point in before death will occur to us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. It's been a wonderfully